Hi, I'm Colleen McNamara, and you're listening to my dad on All Marine Radio on the All Warrior Radio Network.
I've been wanting to do something about the Middle East, but I've been tied up doing other things. And so I called Will, who is an FAO, was an FAO by trade. And so I want to talk to him about the events in the Middle East and get his thoughts on it as he's watched it unfold. So first of all, Will, tell everybody what an FAO is, and then we'll talk about some of the really fascinating things for those of us who served in the region, and we'll dive into get our crystal ball out and see if we can see into the future. So tell everybody what an FAO is and what you did, and then we'll talk those issues.
Hey, Matt, good morning. Foreign Area Officer, FAO. So it's a secondary MOS in the Marine Corps. And basically, I was at a point in my career where I was going to spend 3 to 5 years outside the operating forces. And so I applied to a program. It's a 3.5-year training program. The first year is graduate school in Monterey, where I took the Middle East regional curriculum. And you study across the Middle East politics, economics, military, history. And in the end of that, you take a comprehensive exam. From there, you go across town to the Defense Language Institute. I took the Arabic basic course. And in 63 weeks, you learn the fundamentals of how to read, write, speak Arabic. From there, I went to Cairo for a year and was attached to the U.S. Embassy, but without a real job in the embassy. I had a budget, and my duty was to travel around the Middle East, see the countries, visit the embassies. When I was in town, I would go to short language schools there. So in that year, I was able to travel pretty much the Middle East from one side to the other. I went to Morocco, Tunisia, Malta, extensively in Egypt, Jordan, Israel, Syria, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Oman, Emirates, Kuwait, Bahrain. And the idea is at the end of the 3.5-year program, you've got more than a surface understanding of the region. The Marine Corps does not have a lot of FAOs. At any one time, there's 10 FAOs in training. And it wasn't necessarily clear how you would use that later in your career. For me, it was interesting because I came back, I went to the headquarters, and a year later, the war kicked off and found myself in Iraq and then as a battalion commander. And so it I think helped me significantly over there. I can actually speak a little bit of the language. Then I ended up on the Joint Staff, and the FAO training directed me into the J5 of the Joint Staff. J5 is Strategic Plans and Policy. I was a desk officer for Israel, Egypt, Lebanon, and Libya. And then I got a job working for a 3-star general, and the focus of that job turned out to be a lot of things associated with Israel in particular, including he got named by President Bush to be the monitor of the roadmap. The roadmap was a document signed between the Palestinian Authority and Israel. U.S. was not a signatory, but President Bush wanted to see if he could use this to prod the process forward. And so my experience, somewhat serendipitous, turned out to be pretty good value later on in my career.
All right. So let me start with this. Do you think anybody in Israel believes that they will not be the organization, the nation that puts an end ultimately to Hamas?
Yeah, there are likely people in Israel that don't believe Hamas needs to be eradicated. So take that small
Sliver.
percentage of people
Yeah.
out. Uh, I can't believe that any rational person in Israel thinks that if Hamas is to be removed from the scene, it's not going to be the IDF carrying a big part of that task. Uh, they might get some assistance. They may see some outsiders helping the IDF, and that's obvious. I think we provided some peripheral assistance during the last couple of years, but it's hard to believe that any serious political practitioner in Israel, and even the rank and file people, believe that Hamas is just going to wither and go away without the Israelis, particularly the IDF, being the ones that execute it.
Yeah. So ultimately, uh, putting a stake through the heart of Hamas will fall to Israel. The So let me ask you a question. What do you think the IDF targeting cells are doing right now? Do you think they're on the beach in adjacent to Tel Aviv? Do you think they're taking a few days off?
There's no way, and there might be two components to that, right? They have Gaza, the war they've been fighting for the last 2 years, uh, pretty compact area, 25 kilometers by 10 or 12 or 14 at its widest point, 141 square kilometers total. So they've probably got that map down to 12-digit grid. Uh, that landscape is changing because there's destruction. They don't have a complete map of what's underground. The other half of that is all of the people that they've released. Some very hardcore operatives who got a lot of blood on their hands. If you think about it, they got to have all their biometric data. And I have no doubt that they're attempting to keep track of where those people are going, who they're meeting with, how they're contacting. And that may be into the future ops, but it could very well turn into current ops for both Mossad and the IDF.
Very quickly. Um,
Yeah,
let's talk about the peace. Um, what triggered the peace?
I think there's a couple of components to this. It seems sort of obvious on the tactical level that the IDF just had sort of unrelenting pressure, just gradually squeezing the box down further and further and further, both above ground and subterranean, to the point that what was left of the Hamas fighting force had become disaggregated. They lost their command and control over at least a large minority, if not a majority, of the forces they had. And they were facing, they were backed up against the cliff. Uh,
And, and,
and
and
so,
we all know that the currency of the realm in the Middle East is power, right? If you don't do what you get told to do, right? In most of those nations, you're going to wind up dead, and that's what they respect. They view restraint as weakness, and they look at us and they shake their head and say, "How can you be a great country if you don't annihilate your enemies?" So, to me, what you're saying is the IDF had their K-bar on the jugular vein, and they were starting to lean on it, and it was just going to be a question of time. So that's one piece of it, right? I think, without any doubt.
yeah, and if they didn't have the blade exposed, it was definitely unsheathed, and it was visible, and it was getting close. So the box was getting small. Uh, I think on a strategic level, there might be three pieces. One, you know, removal of their biggest patron in Iran. And Iran wasn't eliminated, and I'm sure that there's still some contact. But the easy part of Iran supporting Hamas, I think, got put back between the Israeli uh, campaign earlier, and then the U.S. bombing of the nuclear facilities, it put the Iranians a little bit back on their heels. I think the degradation of their sort of fellow travelers in Hezbollah and the Houthis. The Israelis prove they can reach. Uh, if you look at the map from Tel Aviv down to Sana'a in Yemen, it's a long ways down there, and the Israelis prove they can get down there and get after the Houthis. And then the whole operation with the pagers against Hezbollah, and then a continuing follow-up. It seemed like as soon as Hezbollah would name a new leader, there'd be another funeral the next week. And so I think the biggest patron, Iran, being significantly degraded, and then also their sort of fellow travelers who are encircling Israel. And then I think maybe the last thing is that strike in Qatar that happened, it seems like a month ago now. Again, it sort of demonstrates the IDF reach to be able to get there. But secondly, it shows an Israeli political willingness to do whatever it takes. I mean, Qatar was not a participant in this, but they were sheltering or housing, or however they want to describe it, some high-level Hamas operatives, and the Israelis sort of
and have been for a long time.
For a long time,
right? And not only that, but one of the financial aiders, Turkey's a financial aider as well. So when you look at the mosaic, that's who Qatar is.
And the Israelis sort of just ignored all the political conventions and the conventional wisdom of the sanctity of borders and all these things, and they went after those guys because they saw them as an existential threat to the country.
No, I think that's a great point, because I think when everybody heard that, right, it was like a whoa moment, right? Like, yeah. Whoa, like, and for Qatar, who's going to defend them, right? And so if the Israelis decide to lay waste to some of our nation, there's nothing we can do about it. And so to me, that had to be a pretty interesting staff meeting that evening after that happened. Like, holy shit, are we gonna be next?
And Qatar is really, it's a very interesting place. I was there in the year 2000, and it didn't remotely compare to some of the cities in Doha in Qatar. Didn't compare to Kuwait City or the sort of shining cities in Saudi Arabia, let alone Dubai or Abu Dhabi. But they had a huge gas find between them and Iran in the Persian/Arabian Gulf, and they have done yeoman's work in sort of shoring up all their potential challenges to be able to exploit that and extract the wealth out of it. But Iran is, it's just over the water from them. And in all of those countries, there are some Shia Arabs that have a certain, not necessarily loyalty to Iran, but to the ideology. And Qatar had seemingly done a great job to be able to play themselves slightly in between everyone and not fall on any particular side. Well, the Iranians fallen down, that in some ways is a positive for Qatar. It's a threat, but now they don't want to be a pariah to the rest of the Gulf's Arabs, let alone to the U.S. And the Israelis shown that they're willing to hit them with a stick. So strange spot for them, and it really a shot over their bow from the Israelis.
What the first trip that President Trump took overseas, he went to the Middle East, right? Do you think? I mean, and all the big news was the investments that these countries were going to make in the United States and yada yada yada. In my opinion, without a doubt, I believe what the president also had on his agenda was, hey, we have to put an end to this. This is costing you guys hundreds of billions of dollars because you guys can't develop economically. You know, it's costing Egypt and Jordan. It's costing the entire region. And I need your help to put an end to it, because the Israelis have done us all a favor, right? They've whacked the Iranians, they've whacked Hezbollah, and just so everybody knows, the Arab states fundamentally opposed to Iran. Okay, so that's the whole Sunni Shiite thing, right? And you have to understand this to understand this picture, and we'll just kind of illustrate it with Qatar and Iran staring at each other across the Gulf. And so, do you think that the president sat down with them and say, "Hey, I have a vision for your region, and it doesn't include, Hamas, who in under no circumstances will entertain the idea of somehow taking Gaza and making it a peaceful place and coexisting with Israel. They can't be allowed." Do you think, in my opinion, given the silence and the economic commitment, I believe that the president is playing chess a little bit, right, with the tectonic plates of power. I'd just be curious if you were to suppose about that.
I think that you're onto something there, but there's a huge economic piece of it. The other piece is, we don't want Iran to get a nuclear weapon. Neither does Saudi Arabia.
No.
Or any of those other Sunni, no matter how religious their states are. Jordan, a much more secular, Egypt, a much more secular. They don't want the Iranians to have a nuclear weapon either. And so the president started with the Abraham Accords. And I think that the strategic piece has always been there, but I sort of like your theory that here's how you add a little bit of a sweetener to this if you see the potential for significant development and be able to diversify economies away from oil, in particular for the Gulf states. And what it requires is that there be a genuine peace, not an armed ceasefire, but a genuine peace, so that business people can project into the future with a certain amount of confidence. I think that is it. I think the theory is sound, and it sounds very Trumpian, right?
Well, and I'll tell you what, I'll give you other examples. There's a media coup that's already happened, that is now playing out in front of everybody. And the media coup was, and I don't think this is any accident, Elon Musk bought Twitter. Jeff Bezos buys the Washington Post, right? And now what you see is Larry Ellison, right? He buys CBS, right? So, and now he's looking to buy Time Warner, which owns CNN, and he's going to be one of the majority owners, I think the majority owner in TikTok. And so this thing, and that's already happened, and now it's just playing out. So very Trumpian. In education, which if you look at the things that get said by people, and I will quote Will here, it doesn't even survive the second question you ask. And most of this shit that we see on TV, it doesn't even survive the first hard question that you ask. So the lack of critical thinking skills that young people in America have is terrifying. Where does that come from? Where does the shit that comes out of their mouth come from? It comes from our education system. He hacks off the Department of Education. You want to sell that shit? Go ahead. Good luck in 50 different state capitals. About 35 of them aren't going to be receptive to you. And so that's the second thing. And then the other thing, to me, was USAID, right? What USAID did, in my opinion, was they funded a lot of stuff that was essentially anti-American, and a lot of it here in CONUS in the United States. But again, that's him playing chess with different pieces of power, right? I mean, imagine if the media just moves to the center, how much different on a daily basis what comes to the American people is. And again, and the other great, titanic shift in the media is that Most people, legacy media is now viewed by less than 20% of the United States. People go to YouTube. Who do I trust on YouTube? So to me, the whole trend line for Trump is that in his first term, he learned. In his 4 years out of office, he learned. And let me tell you this, I've never been his greatest fan, but I'll tell you what, he's nobody's dope. He's a smart guy, and now he's got a little bit of confidence. And so in these deals and in going to Saudi or to the Middle East, absolutely no accident if you look at, right, how he deals with power, money, and how that stuff gets all wired together. So I mean, I think you're right. It is Trumpian in terms of playing chess moves with very, very powerful things.
I would say that we need to talk about the deal, right? Is the peace deal going to come to fruition out of this ceasefire that occurred, a couple of weeks ago? And to me, it's going to be really hard. I don't see it happening as the deal is written.
Okay, so how do you envision getting to peace, and then come back to those thoughts? So this is step one, right? And I'll quote General Zinni. You may not know what phase 2 looks like because it's a clearing picture. I know generally where I want to go, but how I'm going to get there and the methods I'll use to get there are going to become apparent towards the end of phase 1 when the smoke blows out of the room and I have a few more of these pieces. Is that how this is going to work?
Well, so the biggest piece of this is obviously getting the live hostages. Right? There's never going to be a deal unless those live hostages are back. So they got that. The second piece is the dead hostages. And we've seen it's been a little bit challenging to do it. I saw at one point that one of the dead hostages it was not an October 7th hostage, and picked up in 2014, and they got his body back. And because I think October 7th was obviously planned and executed by Hamas, I think there were several freelancers involved. They got some of their hostages themselves. And I don't think that Hamas is a complete monolith. So they didn't necessarily have control of all the hostages. When they say we can't find them, it's a convenient excuse, but it part of that just may be true.
Right.
Not because they're buried under the rubble, because they don't necessarily haven't had control over the people that took those. So I think the live hostages is a huge thing. I think the dead hostages it's a big thing, but it's not like the live people. So they've got it so that in theory, there's not a lot of IDF versus Hamas violence going on. We saw something kick up, I think, a week ago.
Right.
But you haven't seen anything in the news since. So then what's the next step? What do people want to achieve? The president wants the plan executed as it was written and signed by all the participants.
And then and the audio is not matching the video, right? Hamas goes back in there, they execute people, now they're making statements. We have no intention of either laying down our arms or leaving Gaza. Which is like, huh? What? What?
And I don't think that there's a specific clause in the agreement that says they have to lay down their arms. Right? It says they're not going to be involved in the blah, blah, blah. But I don't think there's a specific thing, because that could be monitored and, you could put percentages on it. So I think that I don't think the smoke is clear, because that agreement with so many line items in it has got so many moving parts that it gives Hamas in particular the opportunity to sort of obfuscate, litigate, argue, And
Okay, so I want to ask you about that. What's the Arabic word for I can sign any agreement with you? It's non-binding. You're an infidel, right? And so, I mean, Al Sadr's guys did it in Najaf in 2004, and the Iraqi soldiers that were with the guys with John Mayer in 1-4 said, no, you don't understand. You need to get us in that mosque, and we will cut all their heads off. The walls will run red with blood. Blood. And we said, no, we're going to negotiate. And they're like, no. What is that called? It starts with a T.
So you should have asked me beforehand. I would have done a little study.
You're fluent Arabic speaker.
No, I was never fluent in Arabic.
But it's a real thing, right? And you see commentators say, look, whatever. And so I want to ask you, what forced them to give up the thing that guaranteed their freedom? Because that was stunning that they would agree to this, and it had to be more than, we have our K-bar on your jugular, because they had gotten support. They're the people that run Hamas are in Qatar, right? They're getting moral support, financial support, Qatar, Turkey, some from Iran, but evidently the Iranian money, dried up a bit. Why would Qatar and Turkey put pressure on Hamas to give the hostages back, in your opinion? Because one of the things you read is that those hostages are now a liability. What do you mean? They guarantee my life. How can that be a liability? So I'm curious, what changed in all that?
So it had to be that the president in particular gave them strategic choices, right? And strategic choices doesn't mean that you have good alternatives, but it means you're gonna pick a path here. It seems that's the only way we or he could influence, because the Israelis couldn't necessarily do it. This attack in Qatar is not something that's genuinely sustainable by the IDF. It'd be tough for us to see a continued Israeli campaign in Qatar. It's hard to imagine. So undoubtedly, the U.S. had to put significant pressure on those outsiders, and I think proved with the strike on the Iranian nuclear facility. Think about what we've talked about Iran since 1978, right? A lot of bluster and no activity, right, to include our time in Iraq, when it was pretty obvious that they were funding and supporting through weapons technology some of the forces that were killing Marines.
Oh my God, those penetrators, man!
Right.
It was awful.
And what did we do? We were in a war, and what did we do about it?
Nothing.
We didn't do anything.
Yeah.
We under the Obama administration, we shipped them pallets of $100 bills. Under the Biden administration, we argued that, we sort of want to keep them we didn't do anything. And then Trump goes in and does something. So I think that he had significant credibility if he went to the agents that were in support nominally of Hamas that we have contact with, Qatar being one, Turkey being another, and said, it's time to choose. And so if that is what appears in the history books, 50 years from now, it wouldn't surprise me. But that seems to be the lever against the outsiders that we were able to use. And again, at the tactical level we talked, the box was getting small.
And so do you think at the strategic level, it was this vision of a Middle East beyond this conflict, right? And the wealth that comes to the region as a result of all this shit being cooled out?
Yeah, and I think the Abraham Accords showed some of that, in that he got countries to sign up to this. And what happened? There was no huge unrest. There wasn't anything like that at all.
Right.
And so it proved that this Israeli Zionist bogeyman doesn't necessarily, it's not as strong with, a potential opposition group in your country as it probably was in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond.
Right.
And so it should
And
give
again,
them
the whole timing of the October 7th thing, right? In the wind is that the Saudis are interested in normalizing ties with Israel, right? And right, it's an American administration that is, I don't know, feckless, right? And is not a threat. And Iranian power is at an apex, right? Hezbollah's ready, right? The Houthis have joined in. We're ready. We have all these tunnels. And so to me, when you put all that together and you see that why the timing of it, Israel and Saudi Arabia, if Saudi Arabia joins the Abraham Accord, whoa, right? And so when you look for the timing of it, I mean, you certainly meant to blow that up and the bid for victory. And then, again, what's been amazing to watch is Israel just lay the wood. I mean, and it's not like they hadn't prepared for this. They had, right? And the pager event was a long time in the making, knowing that card would get played. And again, single-handedly eliminates Hamas. I mean, I'm sorry, Hezbollah, right? And it's stunning but again, there was no doubt in the minds of the Israelis that this day would come, no doubt. And but again, to me, what's fascinating is those hostages guaranteed the lives of Hamas. It was their bar. It was the only thing that made the Israelis restrain themselves and listen, because their nation. And if you watch when those hostages came home, I mean, holy shit, man! I don't know how you keep a dry eye when you watch that, right? But that's what they wanted, and so to give them up, to me, like, I wish I could have been listening to those conversations between Qatar, right, Turkey, and whoever they're talking to in Hamas, saying, "Hey, look, man, you've got to give these up." No, wait a minute. Do you know what's going to happen to us if we give these up? That would have been an interesting little phone call to be a part of.
Yeah, it was stunning to me. And then you try and piece together the backstory about how and why it possibly could have been. Um, and also, the Israelis had eliminated significant parts, upper echelons of the Hamas leadership.
Right.
So a lot of the people that were in place there were very middle management just 2 years ago. And how do you make choices? What kind of connections do you really have? If the big boss in Qatar tells you to do something and you're the guy on the ground, well, 2 years ago the guy on the ground had a bit of autonomy, I would say, but today it's very different. So, yeah.
So
Again,
let me ask you another. What's your view in this terms of, will this ceasefire turn into a peace? You're cautiously pessimistic about that, and maybe overtly pessimistic. And again, the nature of Hamas. Is anybody in the region going to volunteer forces if Hamas is still there with weapons to do that? And would the Israelis even allow that?
yeah. So I was reading earlier this week about the coordination cell that's gone into place.
Yeah, we're hearing today in the news that, right, there's American reconnaissance assets, drones overhead, doing whatever they do. But I would imagine that's been going on for a while.
Yeah, and don't hold me to this, but I think the people in the coordination cell, U.S., Turkey, I think Egypt, maybe Jordan. I heard there's potential for Azerbaijani forces in particular to go in, or Pakistani forces. But so now there's this coordination cell that, in theory, is looking to how do we provide the aid and the rebuilding in Gaza. Okay, so does that coordination cell have any influence with IDF operations? And so if the IDF sees what they deem to be clear violations of the ceasefire and the coordination, and they want to conduct operations, and the coordination says, well, we're attempting to deliver aid and rebuild part of that, where does that conflict get resolved there? Does that get resolved in the White House? Does it get resolved in Netanyahu's office.
Well,
Because
and let me ask you this. So do you think the Israelis would agree to, like, because again, when you read the stories of, you know, the United Nations on the take, the tunnels under the hospitals, and all that shit, you read the stories of UN peacekeepers who were bribed by Hezbollah, right? Hezbollah tunnels coming out just adjacent to, I mean, they saw them digging, they knew they were there. I mean, so to me, Israel, right? I mean, again, this is the war. This is the war to guarantee our place, and Hamas has to be destroyed. Anybody who would come in that would be the protector of Hamas, that would allow them to regenerate their own power, means we did all of this for nothing.
but the president got everyone to sign the agreement. We declared peace in the Middle East. He
The easy,
does not want.
the
He
easy
does
part.
not want to see this broken. Right? It's a significant political victory for him,
Right.
as well as a just a great thing. If you're the leader of the free world and you're able to actually do something good,
Right.
I mean, it's just good. Okay.
Right.
But it's also not insignificant politically. But if this falls apart rapidly, then where do we stand? So I think that the president is going to be uh, putting not a chokehold, but he's going to expect significant restraint from the Israelis, which creates a window for Hamas. Where is Hamas right now? Hamas is in the wait, survive,
Replenish.
rebuild.
Right.
It ideologically they cannot change,
We just got 12. We just got 2,000 guys back who are ready to go back and do the exact same thing tonight.
and so ideologically they can't change. They can't just turn into a secular political movement that seeks to provide a better way of life for the people in Gaza. That's not Hamas. So they're not going to change.
Right.
And so this is where I see the future. Again, I said there's an opportunity to obfuscate, litigate, argue. And now the president, which potentially, 2 months ago was 100% behind Netanyahu, now has got some divided loyalty. He's not loyal to Hamas whatsoever, right?
Right.
But he's loyal to the idea that we're going to push this peace plan through. And I think when Kushner and Lutnick were there, and then J.D. Vance came later, I think someone asked them very specifically, how's this going to go? And they said, words to the effect of, we're not sure, but we've already accomplished the impossible once. We're going to continue to accomplish those things because, listen, those guys aren't idiots either. They know that the idea of executing the plan that was signed, 2-3 weeks ago by the letter, there's no hope for that to happen. So what's the best thing that can happen?
Well, and again, I think if you're the head deal maker, if we could get it stopped and if we can get the hostages back, we can write 21 points, and that's great. But we're going to have to negotiate every one of those points into existence. And so he'll say, look, we'll cut every one of those deals when we get to it. And so it's fascinating watching, right? And I think the vision for the Middle East is what's interesting. A Middle East that in our entire lifetime has never been at peace. What does that even look like? And so to me, that's an interesting thing, and to sell to leaders that, hey, look, when you look at, I saw some stunning numbers the other day, and they were per capita income for Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and Turkey. Turkey being like head and shoulders above the other three that I mentioned, but that's the region. And they're dirt poor nations. And so to me, that economic vision, is look, and it's not like you're going to struggle to get money to rebuild Gaza. It'll flow into there. And again, whoever controls that, oh my God, right? So let's talk about 5 different views, right, of this thing as we look at this problem that we've been talking about. So we'll look at from Hamas's view, Israel's view, United States, and then Qatar and Turkey. So give us your take on those 5, that pentagon.
Yeah, I mean, Hamas, I think, is the easiest one to look at. Survive, consolidate whatever they can, wait, rebuild, have faith that the current political environment cannot hold. Um, so if we say President Trump was key to this entire thing, what happens if we get a recession? Inflation goes to 6%, unemployment goes to 7%, interest rates go to 9% in the spring of 2028. Well, it's really hard for JD Vance or whoever to get elected. And all of a sudden, we've got a Democratic administration, which has proved to be no enemy of Hamas. And to Hamas, it's 3-4 years. It's not that big a deal. What happens to the politics in Israel? You can already see the fracturing from both the right and the left. I don't know if you saw the thing about the vote. I think the president came out and said that if the Israelis annex the West Bank, that would be a non-starter and they'd lose all support from the United States. So the right-wing parties in Israel forced a vote in the Knesset saying basically that Israeli law holds in Judea and Samaria in the West Bank. So the people on the right are pushing it. The people on the left in Israel pushing it. How long can the Netanyahu coalition hold? He's the longest serving prime minister in Israeli history. He's 76 years old. So Hamas also sees that potentially Israel can fracture politically. So survive. That's their view. Israel, how long can they maintain the sense of urgency? And not being there, it's really hard to sort of figure this out. But just put our experience in 9/11. On 9/12, there was a white hot burning hatred in the United States. And we maintained that for a reasonably long time and also a sense of unity. I was out of the country. I was in Egypt. I didn't get back until January. And it was pleasantly shocking to me to see the American flags flying everywhere in the country in this sense of unity and urgency. Well, the Israelis just fought a 2-year war, and for a whole lot of them, they got the hostages back. That was the biggest part of it. So the sense of urgency to actually eliminate Hamas, even if they know in the back of their head Hamas is always going to be a threat and not going away unless we do it, they got lives to lead. And so how do you maintain that sense of urgency? And that's going to be the political issue.
I saw somebody comment about that, and he's a fascinating guy. I think I sent you a link to him, but he said, look, there's people in Israel, right? They have no illusions about Hamas, right? Anybody who harbored any illusions, on the left before October 6th, that is done. Everybody in this country knows, right, that we have to destroy them. But there are people that will say it's not worth it anymore. We got our hostages back, right? End it. And if they do it again, we'll go down there and we'll wreck it again. But this continual war with all the capital that it's costing Israel, right, both in terms of international goodwill, which to me is bullshit, by the way. I mean, think about it.
I don't think they care about it that much.
But you know what? They don't one bit. But to Americans, we had 3,000 people killed. We went to war. We fought 2 wars over the course of, 17, 18, 20 years. 750,000 people died in both those countries. If you take numbers off the internet in terms of those estimates, and we wouldn't apologize to anybody for it. The equivalent of what Israel lost on October 7th would have been 35,000 Americans being killed. Could you even imagine what we would do, right? Could you even imagine But for some reason, Israel does not get, they don't get, and it is really stunning, the whole critical thinking, the only democracy in the region, the military that shows the most restraint of anybody, and we show a lot of restraint, but not compared to the Israelis. I mean, the cell phone calls, get out of the area, the leaflet drops, and all the things they do. It's pretty remarkable.
It is interesting, though, to the Israeli body politic in that Hamas, in many ways, attacked the wrong target. They attacked kibbutz, which are, for the most part, on the left part of the Israeli spectrum. If you were going to find someone sympathetic to Palestinian autonomy, a genuine two-state solution, sympathy for the average Gazan, you would find it in a kibbutz. They started out as socialists, and that's where the left is. And Hamas attacked them. And there were also quotes from some of the hostages when Sinwar was down there talking to him, and they said to him, "How could you do this to us?" They couldn't believe that they could be the victims of violence against Israel, but that's not the view from Hamas. Everyone in Israel is wrong. But it just sort of emphasizes how long will Israeli politics hold and how long can they focus on this issue. And if they take focus off of it, it leaves room to obfuscate and litigate and do those things and plays to what has got to be Hamas's strategy. And then the last thing is, let's say the Israelis have made a decision that this is an existential threat. We're going to eliminate it. They just made it harder on themselves because the U.S. is so invested now in this idea that we created peace. And so, we talked about a little bit from the U.S. and that it's such a big deal for Trump that he does not want to see this thing go down a negative path, takes a shine off it. So how much of each of these lines is he willing to renegotiate? We think a whole lot of that's his nature, and he's usually successful with it. For the U.S., if we get to that point where we can introduce third-party forces, how is the U.S. going to get other nations to provide those forces? And it seems, I suspect there's significant economic incentive behind it. Not necessarily outright mercenary, but the opportunity to participate in what can it be less than $500 billion?
Yeah.
So you provide a brigade and you're allowed to bid on, $200 billion worth of, I don't know. It seemed very,
no, it's a business. It'll be a business proposition, right?
It seems almost too simple to think that way, but give me another way, right? Sometimes the simplest way is probably right.
Right.
And I would say, sitting in the Oval Office too, it's as Hamas attempts to survive, rebuild, what leverage does a president have? We have leverage against people outside of Gaza, providing support. But what leverage does he have inside to the true hardened, fanatical Hamas? And that's got to be something that he's looking to figure out, because he doesn't want to be only squeezing Israel as we go forward in negotiating everything. He's got to find a way to put a squeeze on Hamas, and that's really, I think, going to be challenging.
To me, and you go back to our discussion about Qatar and Turkey. How did the hostage deal come about? Was it their pressure? And a bunch of things I've seen says yes, it was their pressure, and it was the demise of Iran, the demise of Iranian money, and Turkey and Qatar saying, "Hey, you've got to give." And so, to me, there's a dynamic that's changing, right? Hamas has been, I'll use a verb, attrited, right, to 6th, 7th, 8th echelon fighters, except they just got 2,000 of the first echelon, second echelon guys back. and that provides them like the hope, the spirit, the morale boost. And so to me, Hamas, if you're Hamas, we got all these guys back. They're so fired up. They're ready to do it again. We're going to lay low. We're going to reconstitute. And so where does that pressure come from? Inside of Hamas, I don't think it does, right? Because I think they're out of their minds now, and they've been rejuvenated to a certain extent. I think that if it's going to come from anywhere, it has to come from Qatar and Turkey saying, we're done.
And just to review Hamas a little bit, it evolved likely out of sort of the Egyptian Islamic Brotherhood in the late 80s, I think 87. And when they started, they were almost just a social service organization. The PLO controlled the West Bank and Gaza, and Hamas and PLO is a nominally secular organization. Hamas started providing social services, right? There are 2 million people that live there, and the unemployment rate is 50 or 60% at some point. Half the people who live in Gaza now, pretty close to that. And so Hamas provided these.
Wait, stop. Go back. Start with half the people because the feed cut out.
Sorry.
Half the people.
Half the people in Gaza are below the age of 18. So Hamas built a lot of goodwill, not necessarily through violence, through providing services to people that were there. And they actually won an election in 2007. So because they've been defeated, you've seen in the media that some of these tribes or splinter groups, there's been violence and Hamas has attempted to consolidate. The people of Gaza don't necessarily know that they've been defeated. I don't think. It would appear obvious, but what is their alternative to being a supporter of Hamas? Now, can this idea of in a rebuilding phase, can other patronage networks other than Hamas be built up to provide a political, social alternative to a one-party rule that's there now?
Have you seen the stories that while the Israelis were controlling Gaza, that they met with other leaders of other clans, armed them, so that when at whatever point they pulled back, they would be more powerful and could take on Hamas? Have you seen those stories?
Yeah, I have seen some of that, and it shouldn't surprise anyone.
Right.
In the problem is, again, not being on the ground, it's hard to understand the demographic.
Right.
Of if we had a war in Kansas City and it was the Chiefs fans against everyone else, right? And the outsider came in and tried to arm everyone else, you're still a tiny little drop in this sea of Chiefs fans. How long can you hold on? And that's, the people that are there that are not going to be supporters or find their sustenance from Hamas. How are they going to get support if there's not an outside force in there? And so if the outside force comes in, one of their tasks, not only maintain the peace, but support agents contrary to Hamas. Building that is a long-term proposition, while at the same time, Hamas is coherent ideologically, politically. So it's an uphill drive on that side of it.
Well, and the other thing that is, you talked about how many young people are in Gaza, right? And I saw a story. It was actually an interview with a TV anchor who had been over there, and he said, "Let me tell you what changed my mind." And he tells the story of a Palestinian woman, suicide bomber, who tries to blow herself up. It gets screwed up. the vest she was wearing sizzles, burns the shit out of her, right? She goes, she taken to the hospital. She's treated there for months for her burns. She's ultimately, tried and put in prison. She's exchanged, and then when she goes back, big celebration, right? And they, say, we'll give you 3 targets. One of them was the hospital that treated her. She chooses the hospital that treated her. And something happens and she screws that up. That gets screwed up and she's arrested again. So I think she got released and lost the prisoner exchange. And so when he said, I interviewed her and said, so like, you're done with this. These people saved you. And she said, oh no. Oh no. She said, I will go back. And he said, to me, that was so chilling. It was so chilling. And she said, I will die a martyr's death. And then he said, and I want you to listen to this. And it was this guy, Hamas guy, said, let me just explain to you the West's great weakness. They treasure life. We treasure death. And you watch that and what you're saying. How does this work? And that's what's across those fences. That's why when you see the Egyptian border at Gaza, the Jordanian border at Gaza, that makes anything we have near our southern border look like a picket fence at grandma's house. And if you've never seen it, just do a search on Egyptian border with Gaza and click on the images. You're like, the Egyptians are serious. They want none of that shit. And so, to me, it's not. So when Will talks about leverage with Hamas, right, in Gaza, I don't know anybody who has that.
Yeah, I may have talked about this some time ago. When I was a FAO, I was actually in Morocco. It was time of the Eid, a big end of Ramadan celebration. And I was in Marrakesh, as a matter of fact. And it's a big holiday. And so I was there with another guy who was traveling with me, and we're having dinner at this place, and a Moroccan family comes, and it's a guy and his wife and his brother and her sister, and then the mother and father's 2 kids, and they're younger than us. And we were talking to them, and it's just an interesting conversation. One of the guys was a butcher, and they all lived down on the coast, and blah blah blah. It's an interesting conversation. Well, later that night, we were sitting in a coffee shop, and we saw the brother come by. We waved him in. Hey, Muhammad, come on in, and so we started talking to him. And so this guy was a butcher in Morocco, and over the course of the conversation, he said it was his life's goal to go and kill Zionists. This is a lower middle class, but's got a steady job in an economy that's not great, but that has potential. It's likely he's never met a Jew in his entire life. And Morocco is considered a pretty moderate Arab country. And this guy had been so propagandized. That was his life's ambition. Imagine people that have lived there. It's just, it's it's hard for us.
To even fathom that, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So.
Okay, so the last piece in terms of the Pentagon perspective is Turkey and Qatar. We talked about, them putting pressure on Hamas to give up the hostages. How do you see, is that simply their pressure is a function of the economic benefits that can come to the region if this one problem, now that Syria's cooled out, right, and not what it was, so you see stability and probably the greatest time ever when there's an actual window. There's an actual window, but the thing that keeps smashing the window is Hamas. This cell of people, right? This small group of people in this gigantic region of the world. What influences Turkey and Qatar going forward? And how do you see them playing a role? Because they've historically been supporters.
Yeah. So, what leverage do they have now? They have the leverage in that the leaders are residents, and if the pressure becomes too great, they'll eject those guys. And then, what leverage do they have to make any changes? Nothing really. Um, I think that they're going to be pretty damn transactional about it. Is there a benefit for them to house the leadership there? There had to be, otherwise they wouldn't have done it.
Do you see the United States putting pressure on them to say, hey, look, because here's what you're getting to in uncharted water, right? So look, if they won't come across with the other points of this agreement, do you see the president, who has a lot to us in Qatar, you would think that they never supported Hamas the way the president speaks of, what is he, the emir?
Right.
Yeah, you would think. They're great friends, and we've been developing some, an Air Force base in Idaho with them, yada yada yada, the airplane gift and all that. We're great friends, right? Except this. Will it be that conflict that Qatar, that like, look, we have all this upside with the United States in the region. Does Qatar look at it and say, look, you want me to stand on principle with eliminating Israel? I think Israel just showed everybody they're not going the fuck away, man. And you're the only ones who don't really believe that.
Just another perspective on Qatar, though. We've known this about them forever. They hosted the World Cup. Nobody gave a shit.
Right.
They got a pile of money that makes Midas look poor. And
but as you said, this is a great political achievement for the president of the United States. And he, like a dog on a bone, at every turn when he gets asked about it, he said, no, it's more or less going the way we thought we would, and the peace is going to hold. And that's his personal guarantee, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody who hates his guts and wants to see him fail or whatnot is just waiting. We're one day closer. This thing's going to blow the fuck up, and then we're going to jam it. Great peace deal, Mr. President. And you know him. He just shit-canned the negotiations with Canada over some stupid-ass ad they ran.
Yeah. So, again, I think that at some point, the pressure, particularly on the Qataris, can come to the point where they eject, any Hamas operatives in the country. But then, what leverage do they have? What conduit? So I don't. They're not going to come to this idea that, oh, this is such a wonderful idea for the world, right? That ain't going to do anything.
Who's not?
The Qataris.
The Qataris.
Yeah. Can it be
you don't think that they see an economic vision of the region minus Hamas that is enticing? Or do you see them? Because again, if you don't see that and you don't embrace that, right, and help make this go away, right, then what you're embracing is Hamas and their ideology and their vision. At some point, we're going to do away with Israel.
They would. I think that they would argue, not in public, but they've played both sides against the middle for the last X number of years. They host a huge U.S. facility there, and they host Hamas terrorists, right?
But it wasn't personal. It's personal now.
Yeah, and that may be it. Right. There's the thing that's hard to calculate.
Right.
In the world of Trump, in that he's completely willing to ignore all political conventions and just do it. And so maybe they get that message. Again, though, they eject the Hamas leadership. Great. Now what? Qatar is okay.
Well, no, I mean, then Hamas is further isolated, right? And again, maybe that's part of the
Wait,
smoke clearing in the room. Then where do they go? Do they go to Iran?
wait, survive,
Right.
rebuild.
Right. We'll go to Africa. We'll go to, somebody that will take us and we'll take all our billions of dollars and we'll go there.
Long game.
Interesting. Where do you get information from? When you sit down and read about this, what do you read?
I would say I'm relatively all over the map. I read the English language version of some of the Israeli newspapers. Um, I read some stuff in the BBC. They used to have a very good Arabic service. I like to they put some of the stuff up. They put up their Arabic language service in Arabic. I like to listen to it. I don't understand it as well, so I've got to read the translations there. Um, a guy that I really like that's written some great stuff about this is Victor Davis Hanson. He's a classicist, but he sort of cuts through and he makes historical political analogies that sort of make sense.
Right.
Um, I
And
avoid,
again, I can't. Let me just pile on to Will's comment. What Victor Davis Hanson does is he will show you the long arc of all of this, right? And he'll show you other examples of other cultures that were in this situation, how it ended for them. And so if you're drawing a parallel between this and that, here's how you can see it. But he's just he's absolutely awesome to watch.
yeah, and I try and be careful of like political opinion people like him, but I find his to be, he roots it in footnotes, even in his pieces, and it to me, it's very easy to see the political bias in American media, what is nominally news reporting. It's fairly easy to see the bias in New York Times, CNN, Fox, ABC. So I don't even bother with that kind of stuff. I think every once in a while someone will come in Wall Street Journal with something interesting, but trying to read that foreign press, although it's harder to pick up on the bias, right? Because you're not sitting in that culture. It just the reporting seems to be more intimate, topical kind of things that allow you to try and interpret based on your own knowledge, experience.
There's a guy named Haviv, and I can't remember his last name. I'll post a link. And he's a journalist, but he's Victor David Hanson-esque in terms of laying the arc of Israeli history out, of Palestinian history, of Arab history, and the swirling, mess that becomes. But I, like you, I enjoy the historical context of it, and at least according to my read, somebody who's not afraid to tell the truth, right? Somebody's not afraid to tell the truth, and that means sometimes it's ugly, but you're still not afraid of it, and so, and then like you, in my news feed on my phone, what is it? The Jerusalem Times.
It might be the Times of Israel.
The Times of Israel, but there's a number of publications that gives you a sense of how news is reported in Israel, and then I follow this other girl since I started doing reels in my post-traumatic winning life. I saw this woman who posts a lot of content, and she's an Israeli content creator. And she gives you the visceral, oh, you mean that guy? The one who murdered Jews? The one who breaks in, he stabs this woman, and then her sister runs down the street away from him. He chases her down the street, stabs her. And she says, so, when you criticize us, she does an incredible comedy routine about Greta. But she says, you're talking about people, and she shows this clip of somebody saying, "We loathe you," and she says, "Oh, you sound upset. Do you want a glass of water?" And then she plays more of the clip and she says, "Oh, you loathe us? You hate us?" She said, "Well, that is a long line. You have to get in. Hitler, right?" And she goes down. And she says, "And those are just the recent ones, right? We could go back much further than you." And you get this sense of, like I said earlier, liberals used to entertain the idea of there was this way to live peacefully, right, next to Gaza, blah, blah, blah. On October 8th, doesn't exist anymore in Israel, right?
Yeah, I
And so but again, it's very interesting. And you're seeing, I'll tell you what, to me, what's interesting is you're seeing a lot of women bloggers. There's a woman who's in the parliament in Canada. She's Iranian. And she does these things where she says, "Hey, for all you people that aren't from the Middle East, right, let me explain some stuff to you. We don't kneel down in the street, right, and pray to Allah in the Middle East. You want to know why? Because somebody would run us over. They're doing that to you to show you that they can impose their will on you, right? Because you will flinch. You will not throw them out of the way." And she said, "So just so you know." And so, I mean, so almost like what happened relative to YouTube and the election, and people resisted the same thing with the American media. You're finding a lot more of it, and which is fascinating, given what the UK is going through, what the EU is going through relative to, Muslims who immigrate and have absolutely no intention of assimilating.
Yeah, when I think of Israel, I you compare it to the U.S. body politic, right? The idea that everyone in Israel is against, um, a Palestinian state. I'm not going to buy into that.
Right, right.
There's, like it or not, there's a spectrum there, and you look at the spectrum in the United States.
Right.
And you don't have to dig very far, and you find things that are, how can anyone be so ignorant, thoughtless? But
They're out there.
it's everywhere, and
Right.
there's elected officials that are so far on either fringe that it's stunning to think that they're talking about the same country that we live in, right? But they exist, and I think in Israel you're going to find the same things, and they I think indicted Netanyahu. I'm not sure whatever happened to the prosecution.
It's pending.
Yeah, and the guy um, has has helped change the country so that it was not an international sort of dependency and was able to economically succeed. And it again, I'm probably just showing my bias. I look at a lot of the policy that he's put in place, and it seems commonsensical and transparent in many ways. And there's a portion of that body politic that would describe him, as a prince of darkness. So
Right.
I applaud a woman like that for coming out, but I don't think that she may represent a majority, but I don't think it's a huge majority. And it's definitely not an overwhelming majority of people. So,
Interesting. All right, give me a final thought as we wrap this up.
yeah, I think that we could schedule a show on this once a year for the next 10 years, right? And there's still going to be something going on with this. I hope that I'm proven wrong. And I hope that I underestimate the president and his drive on this thing. But based on the demographics of the people that are there and the ability to hold a singular thought politically in the U.S. or Israel, um, and also the idea that Hamas has no alternative. They have to completely reject everything that is a basis of their organization
Right.
for the peace plan to truly succeed. I just don't see that happening.
Gotcha. Again, what's fascinating is that this will be the great test of Donald Trump, right?
One of them for sure.
Yeah, and in terms of can he bend the actors in the region and using American power, every facet of American power, American economic, military, right, diplomatic, all the different aspects of American power. Can he use it? And he showed he's not afraid. He got criticized for meeting Putin in Alaska. Then you just heard him, a week ago or 10 days ago, talk about, I think there's an opportunity, going to go to, wherever in Eastern Europe and meet Putin. And then he calls it off. Said, no, not doing it. And so to me, he's not wowed by this stage anymore, in my
No,
opinion. You know what I mean?
not
He
a,
seems pretty comfortable and he understands the cards that he holds. And he's not, if you look at the actions down in the Gulf of America, the if
and
you
also
look,
in the
I don't know, a little bit of comedy there maybe, but if you look at what we're doing down there, right? And again, I marvel when I hear people, being critical of it.
yeah,
There are hundreds of thousands of Americans that have lost their lives to this
100,000 a
shit,
year. 100,000 a year.
that gets pumped into our country from Venezuela, and they benefit from it financially. And so to me, what are we going to do? Send, what is it, the Gerald R. Ford Battle Group? We're going to send them out into the med so they can float around there and go on libo and do whatever. We should be doing this. We absolutely should. But nobody else would do it. Well, you can't do that, and you might upset this guy. So to me, what's fascinating about this is it will be fascinating because I see that he sees himself as a president with a purpose. He doesn't give a shit what anybody thinks because he's already been through that. And we'll see if he can put pressure on Qatar in particular and Turkey in particular to influence Hamas to get this done. And then when it hits bumps, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, I have a feeling we'll probably do this again.
All right.
All right. Any big plans for this weekend here in the great state of Missouri?
I don't live in Missouri. I actually live in Kansas. I avoid Missouri if I can, for the most part.
Is Missouri? So it's outside of Kansas City on the Kansas side of the border.
Yeah, yeah. I'm tomorrow. I'm going to go shoot some skeet with one of my personal heroes, 82-year-old native Kansan who buys a new gun about every 3 or 4 months. Yeah. So I got that as part of my plan for the weekend.
All right. Well, Will, first of all, thank you for doing this and taking the time and the insight. I mean, to me, it's events that we've never seen in our lifetime, and I think it's fascinating to watch history take place in front of you. This what could the Middle East be if you could yank the cancerous molar of Hamas out of its mouth? And how all boats rise. I mean, in particular for Egypt and Jordan and countries like that, who, if this thing gets peaceful, we could see our countries fundamentally change here in the region. So it'll be interesting. And when stuff happens, I will give you a call and we'll do this again. But
All right.
thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt.
All right, more of All Marine Radio coming up whenever I do it. Probably Grant Newsham now that the president's headed east. And I've got some time, so probably hear from Grant Newsham in the next couple days. But Will, thank you very much.
All right, take care.
Thanks, Will. And most of all, thank you for listening. As I said, I'll get Grant on pretty quick because the president's headed in that direction. And it's been a while, so I need to catch up with Grant. And I'll be doing more All Marine Radio because I have the time. It's been from book writing to moving to building a studio to beginning to learn how to produce 3-minute reels, which is, I think, the way the nation consumes information now. And especially with the message that I have for post-traumatic winning and this journey from trauma to joy. You could see the book over one of my shoulders here. Yeah, over that one. And so I'm really interested in making sure that that message get to as many people as I can get it to, and I love doing it because that message came out of All Marine Radio, the interviews I did, everything I learned in those interviews, and so it's been a wonderful part of my life. But if you can't tell, I enjoy talking current events. Spent 3 years of my life in Iraq and Afghanistan, so have been a spectator to a lot of it, and I find what's going on fascinating and distressing at the same time. The lack of critical thinking in the United States, to me, is stunning. Somebody starts screaming about genocide, and you ask them, do you know what a genocide is? Right? And they'll look at you, what do you mean? Never mind. Right? And so a media who has turned its back on telling the truth, and we all saw that, right? When this deal got agreed to, where was the celebration on the part of all the people that had been demanding that the war stop? And where were they? Did they congratulate the president? Did they say this is phenomenal, right? God bless Donald Trump. Did they say any of that? And the answer is no. Did they get called out for it? No. Well, wait a minute. How does that make sense? And so, you see a lot of, in my opinion, very disturbing things. Very disturbing things. And so I like to talk about those things. So thank you very much for watching this, right? Don't be afraid to like, share, and subscribe to this and help me spread this message of critical thinking's a good thing. The truth is something that we all need to entertain, okay? And be very wary of somebody who looks at you and talks about my truth, okay? In case you don't know, that should be a red flag in a discussion. Well, my truth. Oh, your truth. Got it. So, on that note, have a great day. Grant Newsham will be the next person you hear, and hopefully you'll hear that in the next couple of days. So, on that note, I'm out.